Here's a fairly famous story of Niels Bohr dissolving gold despite Nazis during World War II. Max von Laue and James Franck had sent their Nobel medals to Bohr so they wouldn't fall into the hands of the Third Reich. However, it was illegal for any gold to leave Germany. So when the Nazis invaded Denmark, Bohr knew he had to hide the medals. He couldn't bury them out back because the Nazis were likely to dig up the grounds trying to find anything they could. So Bohr had the Nobel Prizes dissolved in aqua regia, a mixture of hydrochloric and nitric acids. This dissolved gold sat on a shelf until the end of the war, at which point the gold was precipitated out of the solution and was recast into the metals by the Nobel Institute and returned to their original owners. Niels Bohr was an instrumental figure in not just scientific history, but the history of the world. It's only fitting that element 107 is named for it. Hello and welcome to Meet the Elements, the series where I tell the stories of humanity through the lens of the periodic table. Bohrium is a synthetic and unstable atom, but the element's namesake, Niels Bohr, is a giant of science, and his story is one worth telling. So let's start with one of Bohr's most noteworthy contributions. In the early 20th century, we knew atoms had a dense, positively charged nucleus in the center with tiny negatively charged electrons zipping about it. The leading model, established by Ernest Rutherford, pictured it as a sort of mini solar system. But there was a substantial problem with that model. According to the physics of the day, an orbiting electron should be constantly losing energy and spiraling to its doom in the nucleus. Then came Niels Bohr. In 1913, the young Danish physicist proposed a solution that changed everything. He took the new ideas of quantum theory and applied them to the atom. Bohr suggested that electrons don't just orbit at random, arbitrary distances, but rather they're stuck in specific, stable orbitals. Think of it like a ladder. An electron can be on one rung or another, but it can never float in the space between rungs. This was quantization. Bohr figured that an electron could jump from a high-energy orbital to a lower one, and when it did, it would spit out a specific amount of energy as a single particle of light, a photon. The energy of that photon perfectly matched the difference between two orbitals, and suddenly the distinct lines of light scientists saw when they heated elements, their spectral lines, made perfect sense. The Bohr model was a masterpiece, and for anyone who's taken a chemistry class, it's likely the model of the atom that you were taught. This work earned Niels Bohr the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1922. Around this same time, Bohr worked to establish the Institute for Theoretical Physics at the University of Copenhagen, what is now known as the Niels Bohr Institute. The institute became a focal point for researchers of quantum mechanics during the 1920s and 30s. Of course, as the 1930s began, a dark shadow began spreading across Europe. With the rise of the Nazi regime, Bohr's institute became more than a research center. It became a sanctuary. Bohr used his connections to help many refugee academics, especially Jewish scientists, escape persecution and find jobs safely abroad. But the danger was closing in. In September of 1941, Bohr received a visit from Werner Heisenberg, who was now leading Nazi Germany's nuclear energy project. The reason for this private meeting has been greatly disputed, as both men give differing accounts. Heisenberg had stated the meeting was about presenting Bohr with the views of several German scientists, stating that nuclear weapons were possible with enough effort. Bohr had stated that Heisenberg tried to convince him to work with the Nazis. By 1943, Bohr's own situation was critical. Although Bohr was an atheist, his mother came from a prominent Jewish family, and as far as the Nazis were concerned, Bohr and his family were Jewish. Word reached Bohr that his arrest was imminent. But aided by the Danish resistance, he and his wife fled their home and made a crossing to Sweden in a fishing boat. After persuading the King of Sweden to offer asylum to Jewish refugees, Bohr was flown to Britain in the bomb bay of a combat aircraft. After being set up with the British nuclear weapons project, Bohr was then sent to America as part of the British mission to the Manhattan Project. Working under the alias Nicholas Baker, he served as a high-level consultant at Los Alamos. He wasn't a primary designer of the bomb, but his wisdom on nuclear fission made him invaluable. More than that, Bohr acted as a mentor to several of the younger scientists working on the project, most notably to Richard Feynman. When the war ended, Bohr returned to Copenhagen, but for him, there was no going back to the world as it was. Having seen humanity unlock the atom, he dedicated the rest of his life to promoting its peaceful use and preventing a nuclear arms race. He wrote an open letter to the United Nations arguing for international cooperation on nuclear energy. The International Atomic Energy Agency was created along the lines of Bohr's suggestion, and he was awarded the first ever Atoms for Peace Award in 1957. Bohr was also a key advocate for the creation of CERN, an organization similar to the United States' National Lab System. Victor Weisskopf, a future director of CERN, would go on to say that without the support of Bohr, CERN likely wouldn't have been established. Even as he worked for peace, Bohr never stopped wrestling with the quantum world he'd helped uncover. His famous debates with Albert Einstein are the stuff of scientific legend. Einstein famously stated that God does not play dice with the universe. To this, Bohr's reply was supposedly to tell Einstein to stop telling God what to do. While this response might be largely apocryphal, it captures their friendly disagreement. Their intellectual sparring pushed both men, and all of physics, forward. Niels Bohr died of heart failure in 1962 at the age of 77. His legacy is almost impossible to measure. From his model of the atom to his foundational work on quantum mechanics, Bohr was instrumental to the quantum revolution of modern physics. The principles he helped establish are now at the heart of everything from lasers to modern medicine. His moral leadership in the atomic age, his efforts to fight fascism during World War II, and his calls for peace and transparency are as relevant today as they ever were. And then there's element 107, bohrium. It's a highly unstable radioactive element that vanishes only a few moments after being created in a lab. To some, there is no higher honor than having an element on the periodic table named after him. The man whose ideas reshaped science and placed him at the center of a world war left a legacy that continues to define our reality. He was far more than the man behind bohrium. He was one of the architects of the modern world. Thanks for watching. I've always had a bit of a fondness for Niels Bohr. I'm far more interested in quantum chemistry than I am most other branches of the subject, and knowing that Bohr was Danish made that feel like the right choice for me since I have a good amount of Danish heritage myself. But now I want to hear from you. Is there anything about Bohr that you felt I left out? Let me know down in the comments. I know there's much more about Bohr I could have talked about, but I didn't want this video to be too long. And if you want more stories about the incredible scientists with elements named after them, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Meet the Elements.